How's it going? And welcome to episode 193 of On the Wire, proud member of the Pitcher List Podcast Network. Follow the pod on the Twitter and on YouTube at On the Wire Pod. I am Adam Howe. You can follow me everywhere at 80 grade. That's all spelled out. Kevin Hasting can be followed either at Hasting Kevin or at Chasing Wins. We got a great show lined up for you today and a lot to talk about. Kevin, I don't want to say we took last week off. But last week's show was really easy to prep for because it was a draft. And it might have been one of our longest episodes, but we didn't really have to do any prep. Now we've got a whole lot of news and things that are going to be impacting and changing the draft landscape based on players signing, whole bunch of trades. And one of the noisier winter meetings that I can remember. I feel like there was a couple of years in a row where we kind of just came out the winter meetings with, do they even do anything at the winter meetings, or do they just like sit around a campfire and share stories, but they don't actually make any moves? This was not the case this year. How was it kind of following along for you all week? Because I felt like every day there was at least 3 or 4 big things coming through the pipe.
Yeah, it was great, Adam. Hope you're doing well, by the way. I think it worked like we feel like it's supposed to, I
Right.
think, for once. For once, right? We knew the Juan Soto deal was needed to happen before too many other things could. A couple of the big signings did occur prior to Juan Soto making his decision, but once we got that official word on Sunday, which we had been told we probably would, with the winter
Right.
meetings officially starting on Monday, and then everybody did kind of
Fall in line.
fall into line and let's go, let's sign. So it seems like for the first time in quite a while, it worked the way we think it's supposed to.
Yeah, like growing up, that's what you kind of just assumed, like things happened during the winter meeting. And then again, yeah, we just gotten complacent. I feel like I go into the winter meetings expecting not to really hear anything. It was, as a Red Sox fan, I remember like the big signing from like Kurt Schilling getting signed in 2004, right after Thanksgiving into the winter meetings. And that was like the biggest one I can remember. I'm sure I'm missing some over the last 20 years. But this was it was just so noisy. It was amazing. The Discord news channel, the news channel in the Pitcher List Discord was just popping off. That's because that's where I get all of my information now. Like I rely on everybody else to be on Twitter to then share basically just whatever Jeff Passan says. And if he says it, then it happened. If he doesn't say it, it probably didn't happen. And except for this breaking story from Ben Palmer, as anybody watching can see as we have it in our media section of this video, we got pitcherlist.com breaking stories now from the winter meeting. Nick Pollock, of course, at the winter meetings, or at the winter meeting. I always say that wrong. It's just one meeting. And so that's, you make sure you're checking that out. And I'm sure we'll reference this a little bit later on as we talk about some signings the Orioles did actually make over the last week or so. But Kevin, let's get right into it, because we've got signings, we've got trades, and we've got a very different landscape as far as roster construction goes, and both questions and answers created from all these moves. We're going to start off with a couple of signings, a couple of starting pitching signings. We haven't seen Corbin Burnes sign anywhere yet, but we did see, the one I'm going to lead with, the biggest one here, Alex Cobb. Alex Cobb signs a 1-year deal with the Detroit Tigers. And I'm more interested, I don't know why it is, and maybe it's because there was the Rule 5 draft as well, so I think of this all the time, with Akil Baddoo being a very popular Rule 5 draft, one of those Rule 5 drafts that actually looked like he was going to pan out and just do something really good. And he did for the, when he first came over with Detroit. But he got, because of this, they needed to open up the spot on the roster, so he got DFA'd. Akil Baddoo did. So first and foremost, let's go back to Cobb. Cobb with Detroit, where Detroit is, where they're going. Is this an opportunity for Alex Cobb to, either put together a solid season for a winning ball club and make a better reputation for himself, or is this just a depth piece for the Tigers to kind of piece together as they need to? What's your thoughts on Cobb in Detroit?
No, I think Detroit's planning on Alex Cobb being in their rotation. And from the get-go, even with Cobb in the rotation, when we look on Fangraphs right now, he's slotted in at number 3 with Casey Mize and Jackson Jobe both behind him. So I think he's comfortably in this rotation. Now, we only got 16 innings out of him in 2024. Prior to that, he had 3 seasons of under a 4 ERA. Right? And I know ERA isn't what we're looking at for being predictive going forward. But 149 and 151 innings in 2022 and 2023. I doubt Detroit is expecting that out of him, but I could see them expecting 120 to 140. Probably something in that range coming back. And I've said this for years. When Alex Cobb is healthy, I want him on my fantasy teams. And we know Detroit's a nice ballpark for pitchers. So
Mm-hmm.
it appears he's healthy. And if healthy, I'm in on Alex Cobb. Definitely in draft and holds, but even in late rounds of redraft leagues, I think this is a guy I would draft hoping he can stick as a team streamer.
I understand the 1 year deal. I think as I'm looking at his player page, I don't think I realized how many teams Alex Cobb has played on
Yeah.
since leaving Tampa Bay. Just bounced around. I do remember his Baltimore time. I do not remember the year in Anaheim. I mean, he's forgetful, only 93 innings. Of course, spent most of his time the years that you're talking about in San Francisco, and just did not pan out anything in Cleveland. But it's nice for him to get that 1 year deal. I mean, he's not. He's not. I mean, he's kind of old. He's not ready to retire. Obviously, glad that he could find a spot where he can get that 1 more year deal on a team that could continue to make the playoffs, and see if he can make some kind of run and get that last thing in. And nice to see somebody from Boston continue their career as long as possible. So cool there. Can you see Akil Budu actually panning out anywhere else in anything more than like a platoon split that he kind of found his way in Detroit?
Probably not, unless he can make a big change and bring that strikeout rate down. Other than that, probably not. But I don't think this is the last we'll see of him, but
Sure.
I do unfortunately think it's most of his plate appearances will be versus lefties. So the short side of the platoon going forward for a while, unless he can figure out that strikeout rate against righties.
Yeah, between being sent down, injuries, and just it being in that strict platoon anyway, in the strikeout rate, only 82 plate appearances for Detroit last year, in Detroit at least. I know you spent quite a few portions of the year in and down, up and down in AAA as well. So we'll see if he can latch on. Maybe I mean, he's DFA, so there's still a chance he actually just gets traded or gets picked up in some fashion, or if he ends up just being outrighted altogether. We'll see how that works out. The next starting pitcher to be signed that I want to talk about, because it doesn't really lead into anything else, is Nathan Eovaldi. He stays with the Texas Rangers on a 3-year deal. It's not really much to say except for the fact that, this shores up one more spot in the Texas rotation. And so there's a little bit less question marks out there as far as like, are they going to bring in somebody else? Does this kind of solidify them not bringing back somebody like Scherzer or signing another veteran? Do you think this kind of like just shores up that spot in the rotation, or is Texas still going to be a mover for one of those pieces in their rotation?
I don't know. I I wouldn't completely count them out of making another move. However, right now, roster resource on Fangraphs does not have Kumar Rocker in the starting rotation. So we know they have that piece as well. With Nathan Eovaldi, Jacob deGrom, who I am of the belief that we will get 120, 140 plus innings out of Jacob deGrom this season, with the elbow being fixed. They get Tyler Mahle back. I'm really excited to see what Cody Bradford can do if they give him some run after starting off 2024 on such a high note, getting injured and then coming back at the end of the year and not skipping a beat. Ended up getting a total of 76 innings. I think Cody Bradford could be really good. And probably, he's probably looking at that 120 to 140 innings again. So they will need other pieces, but they have Kumar Rocker. They're getting Tyler Mahle back as well. John Gray, hoping for a bounce back out of him. So I don't know that they will be looking for another starter. You can never have too much.
Mm-hmm.
They won't, they're not going to not pay attention to what's available. But I would think the Texas Rangers are probably pretty happy with the starters they're going into 2025 with right now.
Yeah, I mean, I like Cody Bradford here a lot, not only from what he's done, but he's literally their only lefty starter, like in their organization. As if
Right.
anybody's watching, they're watching me scroll through their roster here over on Roster Resource. Yeah, you've got Rocker, you've got Jack Leiter, so you've got some options coming up, but they're all right-handers, and they got nobody in their bullpen that can be stretched out and turn into a starter. So if they bring anybody in, you got to assume that they go after some kind of lefty, either lefty long man or lefty starter as a sixth man. So just something to keep an eye out there. And kind of leading up to the biggest starting pitching signing of the last week or so, Max Fried signs an 8-year deal. This is that lefty starter off the board, going to the New York Yankees with the largest free agent, the largest contract for a left-handed starter or pitcher in general. 8 years with the New York Yankees. No deferred money, I don't believe, on that contract as well. So he will be, with in pinstripes for quite a long time. And yeah, I mean, this shores up. This makes the next thing we'll talk about. It gives the Yankees a little bit more roster flexibility to make the move that they made the other day. We'll get to that later. But first, let me get your thoughts on Fried in Yankee Stadium. Does this help, hurt, or just don't care that Max Fried is at an echelon of starting pitching where you didn't really care where he was going to go? It wasn't really going to change your viewpoint on him in drafts.
Yeah, I don't think it matters to me too much with a guy like Max Fried. And even with the concerns of the short porch right field, him being a lefty helps mitigate that. It would be typically right-handers going opposite field that would do most damage against him, we would think. So yeah, and the funny thing to me, not funny, humorous, but kind of ironic is, Max. I've heard concerns about Max Fried's health, and I understand that we're always very leery when things are going on with pitchers, but he made 29 starts and got to 174 innings in 2024. 2023 is the season where he only made about half the starts, a little under half of what you'd hope from him. Every other season of his career, other than 2023 and the COVID year, he's went out there close to 30 plus times. So I think, yeah, these deals, 8-year deal, right? Do I expect him? He's going to be 31 before the start of this season. So 7 years late at 38, do I expect him to be worth this? No, nobody does.
Nobody is. Yeah.
But I still think, record deal for a left-handed pitcher. if they get 5 healthy seasons out of Max Fried, I think that would be the hope. Then this will be a great deal. I think they slide him right in behind Garrett Cole, makes this a much more feared postseason rotation in a postseason series. I think we expect the Yankees probably to make the postseason, as many teams that make it these days. So, yeah,
Mhm.
this is a move that they make to try to finish it off in 2025. They couldn't quite do it in
Yeah, that's
2024. I like the move.
yeah, and of course, we'll get to it, sooner or later. But they did not end up with Juan Soto, so this is kind of like their parting gift. And so they decided to focus on the rotation instead. So I assume they don't make this deal if they end up with Soto, just based on
It
the
was really
contract that they were
quick
going to
after
get.
Soto, right? It was
Exactly.
almost like they had this in their back pocket if they had to go here, right?
Yep. Yep. It was. Something tells me that like the Yankees and the Mets were going to get one and the other, and it was just happened to
Yeah.
be that the Mets, ended up with Soto. They're like, fine, we'll take Fried,
Yeah.
and they're okay with it. So the Yankees aren't done here. They make a trade because they shored up part of their rotation. They had a little bit more flexibility. They could part ways with Nestor Cortez, and they do so along with prospect Caleb Durbin, who we talked about being somebody that Aaron Boone said would play a big role for the Yankees in
He did.
2025, and he absolutely did. They netted them their new closer in Devin Williams. So Nestor Cortez, Caleb Durbin, and some cash go over to Milwaukee. Devin Williams gets traded over to the Yankees. A pretty obvious statement to make that Devin Williams becomes the new Yankees closer. Sorry, Luke Weaver fans out there drafting him. I know, Kevin, that wasn't you. So Devin Williams in pinstripes, can he continue to dominate the way he had for Milwaukee, or will the Yankees just drive him into the ground and cause him any of his past injuries to kind of come back and haunt him? What are your thoughts on Williams in New York?
I think he's gonna be just fine. I was looking to see if there's any news on the back injury that held him out early in 2024. I haven't seen anything. I think that he probably feels that that is behind him.
Hmm.
So we have an amazing, 235 innings over the last, mostly he got a good chunk of that in 2021, 2022, 2023.
Hmm.
But his career ERA is under 2. 235 innings, under 2. Yeah, he's gonna run with
That
this,
seems
and with
good.
the wins the Yankees can put up, those that have been drafting Devin Williams, he's pretty high on the reliever list, not quite at the top as he was last season, and that injury scaring people away a little bit, I think. So those that have got a little bit of a discount so far in draft season, they're going to enjoy this. On the other side, um Trevor McGill, those that have been drafting him late, this is a huge boost, more than likely, right? This when you start talking early drafts, and so far, if somebody's been taking late stabs on Trevor McGill, that could be awesome.
Yeah, as I'm frantically trying to find, there we go, Devin Williams's draft chart, and I was wondering to see, like, just going from the Brewers to the Yankees, and obviously the success that the Yankees saw last year, whether or not this would, in immediate terms, boost him up. Hasn't really affected anything. He is seeing a little bit of an uptick, but there's only so much of an uptick you can make when you're already being picked within the top 50
Right.
overall in drafts.
Top
But
4 or 5
yeah,
closer. Yeah,
closers, you become the top third closer instead of the fourth closer off the board. So not too
right.
much to gain there, but yeah, the Miguel call out is a big one. Do you like, where do you put Miguel then in this situation? Assuming, Milwaukee always has a reliever that is ready to come up and ready to move into that slot. We saw that when Williams went down, and we had three guys that we were contemplating who was going to fill in that spot. Right now, Miguel he is having just like it's almost a straight line up as the drafts happen on that day. He got picked between just on the 13th of December. He got picked between 108 and 304. So you can see that, as the news breaks, the person picking 304 is feeling pretty good about themselves as that draft pick comes along. But is 108 just a drastic response to this, or do you see him being worth that kind of draft capital?
I'm pulling up my ADP. I didn't have it up for some weird reason, but I think that's actually probably slightly high for me, because I would expect, last week when we were doing the gladiator draft, we talked about, where we want our second closer, and it
Right.
was kind of that Lucas Urseg, Ryan Walker, guys that we're not 100% confident in, not 100% certain the team is going to let them run with the job, but we're fairly confident, and we do like the skills if they do hold on to the role. That's about where I think I would start. That's my first thought, and I think that's a little later than 108. I'm just going to go back and take the last 2 weeks
Yeah.
of
So
draft champions.
I've got
And
Gladiator ADP up on the screen right now, just to put in perspective. And I'm looking at
perfect.
113. Kirby Yates is at 113. And I scroll down a little bit further just to find the
And he
next
was slightly
reliever.
ahead of Urseg and Walker.
Yep.
So yeah, so it's just a little high for me, but not too much. Like that's where I think he's going to fall. Is there in that, yeah, 110 to 130 range where
Yeah.
we see a couple of the other guys like that.
Luke Weaver is at 127. He just slots right into Luke Weaver's spot, right? I mean, he's just
Uh,
becomes the just draft Miguel instead of Weaver, and you're good to go.
right. And a whole lot of people wish they could just make that swap right
Exactly.
now.
Exactly. That's a true story. You can't make trades in gladiators, I don't think. Well, we've got some more. That wasn't even like the first trade. It just kind of made sense to segue into it from the other conversations. We got a lot more trades to talk about, and we are going to talk about them right after this quick break. All right. So the first big trade that happened in all these things actually came from my Red Sox. And as I was telling you right before we started recording, it just literally felt like a mirror image of when the Red Sox traded for Chris Sale with the White Sox, of course. I'm talking about their trade for Garrett Crochet becomes a Boston Red Sox for a bunch of prospects, which is exactly what the Red Sox did for Chris Sale when they traded out Moncada, Kopech, and a couple other pieces. This time it was for catcher Kyle Teal, outfielder Braden Montgomery, infielder Chase Meadroth, and then right-handed pitcher Wickelman Gonzalez. So a lot of pieces here. My question first and foremost, will any of these guys end up making a bigger name for themselves than any of the names that the Red Sox sent with the Chris Sale deal? And of course, Moncada and Kopech were the two big names in that deal.
Mhm.
There's the jury's still out on Kopech. There's still time there. Moncada also still technically time. But will the White Sox actually be able to use they can get a lot for Crochet? Do any of these names stand out to you? And I will admittedly say I am not sure. And I'm not confident in that respect for the White Sox. I'm happy that this trade was made as a Red Sox fan. And it wasn't even Dombrowski that had to do it, which is usually what we would say as a Red Sox fan when that term was coming in. So what are your thoughts on any of these guys making a name for themselves in 2025, specifically for the White Sox?
Um, it's in my mind at first glance, it's a little underwhelming when you're talking Garrett Crochet.
Sure.
But almost any package would be. We don't see the high ranked prospects moved like we did 10 years ago. We don't see that happen. It's a good group. I think there's potential here. I don't know that I'm specifically more interested in any one. I've seen the most talk I've seen since the trade happened has been back and forth on Kyle Teal on how good he might be. I you know, we just don't know, right? Even it, when you follow these guys, if you've watched all four of these minor leaguers play a lot, we still don't know. We have no idea how they could translate to the major league level. I think we forget that sometimes, and we forget that an awful lot. Um, but you know, it was fairly well believed that Crochet was going to be moved. And I'm kind of intrigued here. We made a lot of fun of the White Sox. We apologize to our friend Mike Carter often when we bring up the White Sox. But hearing some others talk about as bad as the White Sox were in 2024, their organization, their system wasn't in horrible shape, and they were continuing to make moves on that front. So bringing this group of four in for Crochet, because they're not going to be a good baseball team while they
No.
have Garrett Crochet under control. I think, yeah, I think this is fine. I think if I'm a White Sox fan, this is about what I would have expected.
I will say, like, at least 3 out of the 4 guys are all AAA players. They can
Right.
all make their way into Chicago
They're
South
close.
Side by the end of the year for sure, with the exception of Montgomery, who's still probably going to start in Single A, if not High A, to start the season. So I don't expect to see him for a little bit. But between Teal, the catcher position is such a crapshoot unless you are a top echelon. And even those guys, Joey Bart is taking so long to actually, come to terms with what we hoped or expected out of him.
Yeah,
But
so
unless,
many of the top
yeah,
catching prospects recently we've seen move off a catcher before they're even in a major league game.
yeah, exactly. All right. So that was a big deal. I mean, is there much to really say about Crochet being in Boston? Like, of course, Fenway, not the most pleasant of parks. White, being on the south side of Chicago, it was kind of a neutral situation there as well, but going to a more hitter friendly environment, Fenway, but hopefully a better or a winning ball club in comparison to the other colored socks that he was wearing before. Crochet in Boston. Thoughts in general there?
I think this is exactly the type of ace that Boston needs. Misses a lot of bats, right? That helps alleviate the park factors. So missing a lot of bats, fitting in right at the top of the rotation, and the innings, that was a big deal in 2024, and it would kind of worked out not great for those rostering him in fantasy. The last couple of months of the season, a lot of 4 inning outings, but that's going to work out perfectly for the Red Sox because
Yeah.
he built up doing that to 146 innings. Steamer has him projected for nearly 170 innings, and if he's healthy, I could see him go over that. I think he could push to that 180. That's kind of the new 200.
Yes.
I think that's what's going overlooked, as many people were really upset about that load management, but going into 2025, we're going to be happy it happened.
Yeah. Not a free agent until 2027. So in theory, he's with the Red Sox for the next few years as well. Just trying to build up his arbitration numbers as best he possibly can. I don't care. The Red Sox have plenty of money. They can pay the man whatever he ends up being worth. All right, so that was another big trade there. I don't think that really impacts the draft capital on Crochet. You're still drafting him where you're drafting him. If anything, it might actually bring him up because he did, like you said, did get up to that 146, but only accrued 6 wins in that time. Not only because he was with the White Sox, but because of all those 4-inning stints in the the second half that you talked about. So not expecting that to be the case in Boston. I can't imagine him not getting double-digit wins or doubling his win total
Right.
from last year in a Red
Steamer
Sox
hasn't
uniform.
projected. Steamer hasn't projected for 12. That's a big number on a projection for wins. So, and they're typically conservative about it as well. So we're probably looking at more like 14 or 15, actually.
Yeah, that'd be nice. I'd be okay with that.
I
All
would
right.
too if he's on my fantasy roster.
Exactly. All right, we've got a couple more trades to get to. We got a lot to talk about, Kevin. But I'm going to catch my breath here. We're going to take another quick break. All right, so let's get into this trade between the Texas Rangers and the Miami Marlins. Jake Burger, not a name I expected to see, moved again, as he did move from the White Sox to the Marlins recently. Now on the move again to Texas from the Marlins. Marlins get back a couple of young guys as well. This is, kind of par for the course, what the Marlins like to do. Maximo Acosta, Eshedri Vargas, and Brian Mendoza go to Miami. Jake Burger in Texas, what role are you expecting out of him in a Rangers uniform? And can we continue to see him just kind of mash baseballs the way he's been doing the last couple of years?
Yeah, barring another move, he's the everyday designated hitter right now. They still have Nathaniel Lowe at first base and Josh Young at third base. And so this may be the plan. Everyday DH for Jake Burger. I think he's probably a little higher in the lineup than Roster Resource currently has him 7th, although it would take some shuffling because, Simeon, Seager, Langford, Adolis Garcia, they're the first 4, but I could see Burger sliding in. I know Nate Lowe being a lefty, so maybe Burger only moves up to 6th. That's a little disappointing. I would rather him landed somewhere where he could be a little higher in the lineup. However, at the same time, if the Texas offense as a whole bounces back to what we saw in 2023, a couple of lineup spots isn't going to cost him many plate appearances anyway. So I think it's great. I think it's great for his RBI numbers with those guys in front of him, especially Corey Seager stays healthy and we see Wyatt Langford take that step forward and give us an entire season like we saw the second half in 2024. I've been a big Jake Burger fan for a couple of years now, and this doesn't change it. It might even boost it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I like about this is that he, as you said, he slots in as the everyday DH. He still has the first and third base eligibility going into 2025. And they don't have another obvious DH. Like they don't have it. The Rangers don't have anybody in their lineup that like needs to play DH, even half the time. Everybody else is a decent fielder, if not an excellent fielder in some cases. So I don't expect that he's the only obvious DH on the roster. So that does bode well, and he can still play those corner spots if they want to, baby Josh Young a little bit, as he has had those injury concerns throughout the course of his career, his young career so far. Nathaniel Lowe has had his ups and downs. Looks like it's more on the upswing than the downswing right now. So, but it's nice to know that Burger, it's not like he is a nothing Burger out in the field as well. So
this is probably a pretty big hit to Leody Taveras and his playing time unless he gets moved. Because I thought Taveras would still get his plate appearances. I thought due to the knee injury that Adolis Garcia played through in 2024, he might see a lot of time at DH because, as you said, you're 100% correct. They don't have somebody that has to play DH. I thought Garcia would move to that role a little bit, and they'd have the defensive outfield out there of Taveras and Langford and Evan Carter. Now, as long as Evan Carter is back is okay and healthy, so that probably means they don't want to move Taveras. They need an insurance policy on Evan Carter's back. So for 2025 fantasy teams, if Texas stays healthy, Leody Taveras just took a big hit in playing time.
Yeah, and I mean they don't have a whole lot of infielders coming up. Justin Foscue's coming back from his injury, and that's pretty much the only name that either made an appearance last year or should be expected to make an appearance of any consequence going into 2025 as well. So, not a lot of competition on the way in unless they do make a signing. All right, so moving on to the next trade. This was a fun one because it was ultimately a multi-team trade, a three-way trade that didn't
Mhm.
start off that way. Andres Jimenez goes to Toronto in what appeared to be a Nick Sandlin and Spencer Horowitz return to the Cleveland Guardians, but then Spencer Horowitz gets flipped later that day to Pittsburgh for a couple of pitchers. Josh Hartle, one of their top pitching prospects from Pittsburgh, Luis Ortiz, obviously seen in the majors, and Michael Kennedy. They all end up in Cleveland as well. So Cleveland definitely a quantity over quality situation here, but they basically trade Andres Jimenez for four different players. Let's start with Jimenez in Toronto. Is that a better situation or a worse situation for him as far as fantasy playing time that you're seeing, at least in the short term?
I as playing time, I think it's a lateral move. However, he's probably hitting a little lower in Toronto's lineup. The way it looks right now, they're going to stick with Bichette near the top of the lineup, of course, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Will Wagner as a designated hitter right now on roster resource. I don't know if that's what we'll see in late March, early April of 2025. Toronto still wants to make some more moves. So Jimenez could move up, and if Bichette continues to struggle, maybe he gets back near the top of the lineup. I like this landing spot for Jimenez because I think he might just need a bit of a change of scenery. We talked a couple of weeks ago how it was a disappointing season,
Mm-hmm.
but the stolen bases were there. He got the 30, the same 30 he had in 2023. The power came down from 15 down to 9 home runs. That was the disappointing part. And he had 17 in 2022. So the mid-teens home runs down to single digits, that was the big missing piece in 2024. So I think it's a fairly lateral move, but I was already optimistic for a bounce back in the power department. Of course, projections when the two previous years he had 15 and 17 are going to give him the bounce back. They have Steamer's got him at 13 home runs right now. But I think this move to Toronto is lateral at worst, and you never know what's going to happen with the change of scenery and getting some new coach's eyes on his swing. It could end up being better.
I mean, this is also an incredibly large uptick in defense for the Blue Jays in the middle infield.
100%. He's going to
Between
be if he's healthy. This is a 162 game player,
Yeah.
right?
This is also definitely their everyday second baseman, while Bo Bichette is healthy and still in the lineup and still on the roster. And between what we saw out of Addison Barger not being very pleasant to look at in the field, or Elvis Martinez having his difficulties both on and off the field. I'm talking about obviously the suspension from the PEDs and all that fun stuff. So we have a situation where they just, at one point, I was under the impression Toronto had a plethora of infielders coming up through their minor league system. And now it seems as though they don't have anybody that's coming up that can play any one particular position. And so we got to see exactly where they're going. I am also wondering if this is kind of a precursor or kind of a backup to the Bo Bichette situation, where we can see Bo Bichette being on the trade block mid-season, knowing that they have Jimenez for the next couple of years to move over to shortstop and give them a little bit of flexibility in that realm. So I like this a lot for Jimenez. I agree. I think he plays every day, becomes a little bit more of a guaranteed, not guaranteed bounce back, but somebody who's going to be just as relevant in their new lineup as they were in their old lineup, and now also probably playing in a slightly better ballpark, as well as Cleveland was playing, at least for the first half of the season, the ballpark. Toronto has a longer standing history of being a more friendly ballpark in general.
Yeah, Davis Schneider had 454 plate appearances for Toronto in 2024. 3 players on their roster currently had more than that. And one of them is Andres Jimenez. This is exactly the kind of guy they absolutely needed to add, and they need another 1 or 2 of these guys as well.
Yeah. Javi Schneider just finding a way into the lineup, playing multiple positions, and just I don't know why. We are obviously a big fan of his, and it seems like Toronto is almost being forced to also be a fan of his. Currently slotted to be on their bench by roster resource, but I find I won't be surprised to see Schneider find his way into another 450 plate appearances somehow for the Blue Jays.
Oh yeah.
The other part of that trade worth noting is Spencer Horwitz, who was leading off for Toronto for the longest period of time, now heads down to Pittsburgh by way of Cleveland. I guess you have to drive through Cleveland from Toronto to get to Pittsburgh geographically, so it kind of makes sense. He's just stopping on the way. But what kind of role are you expecting out of Horwitz? Is this kind of by default a downgrade because he was such a at the top of a decently offensively producing lineup and now going into Pittsburgh, or is that role kind of like staying the same there?
Well, that's tough to say with Kiner Falefa right now projected to be the leadoff hitter for Pittsburgh. I could see Horowitz with, he had a 337 on base percentage a 357 on base percentage. I could see, I know Jason over at Roster Resource has him slotted into the middle of the lineup. He does have that at least moderate power and could develop into a little more, but did get to double-digit home runs in under 400 plate appearances. But that's going to be interesting to see. This is something that we won't be able to monitor until spring training unless the Pirates come out and tell us something. But I'm not so sure he doesn't move to the top of this lineup as well. But without knowing that, that's a big difference, from 5th to 1st in a lineup. That could be, upwards of 70 plate appearances over a season. So this is something we're going to have to watch. I really do like Spencer Horowitz coming into 2025. I had prior to the trade, hadn't been able to pull the trigger on him in a draft yet. But at first base, I'm getting my first baseman late, and he's an option. He's typically just getting taken out from under me right about the time I'm starting to think about him. But yeah, I would like to see him move to the top of Pittsburgh's lineup. I think their lineup is going to be improved. Maybe not a lot, but I think it's going to be okay. Kind of like we talked about both them and Washington last season. Washington's probably moving along a little better than Pittsburgh. They definitely are. I think Washington's got a better lineup than Pittsburgh right now, but I still think they could. Pittsburgh could put up better offensive numbers than they have in the past few seasons, and I would like to see Spencer Horowitz move to the top of the lineup.
Yeah, and then the other piece of that, of course, all those pieces going over to Cleveland. I'm going to correct myself. I'm pretty sure I messed up the same thing, the same tweet that went out. Nick Sandlin actually was the pitcher that went to Toronto, not from Cleveland, not to Cleveland. But the other pitcher that Cleveland did get that will slot right into their rotation is Luis L. Ortiz. He definitely had some spurts last year for the Pirates where he was starting to look like, the solid piece of that rotation for many years to come. Obviously had his hiccups as well. Does the pitching machine in Cleveland do things in a positive way for Ortiz where you're gonna go ahead and buy low on this situation, especially in like a dynasty league or in a draft and hold? Does he make him a little bit more viable of a piece that you want to jump up in your drafts?
I think so. I'm at least intrigued. We got 135 innings out of him in 2024, Luis Ortiz, and that was with only 15 starts. Now he had 22 relief appearances to help boost that number, but that's a pretty good innings total. And especially after, he added almost 50 innings onto what he did in 2023. Um, Projections have him a 20 inning jump up to 155. I would say at least that. And yeah, absolutely intrigued with what we've seen Cleveland do with pitchers over the last several years. Um, at worst, um, this he's going to maintain his spot in ADP, but I give him a bump. I think here. Did you look and see where he had been being drafted
No,
earlier?
I have not, but I can pull him
Oh,
up.
I got it.
Oh, you got it. Okay.
160th pitcher off the board over the last 2 weeks, and probably some reaction to this news. Um, his min is 308, his max 494. So a really wide range there, a little wider than the ranges of others around him. So um, let's click. I'm pretty sure that 308 is probably going to be pretty recently
Well,
as we look at his
it's both.
draft.
I'm looking at his graph.
Oh, yeah, he had one early in the
His
year,
first draft in early
308.
October, he went 308, and his most recent draft is also 308.
Right. But there is a definite that
Yeah.
he has been being drafted higher over the last 3 or 4 days than he had been. So a little bit of a bump here, but still post 300. Um, yeah, I'm absolutely in on taking a chance and see what Cleveland can do with a guy that performed pretty darn well in 2024.
Yeah. So I mean, I think what a lot of people think about, the Cleveland pitching machine here is it's a lot of
Mhm.
like the guys coming up, and it's because of all the reports that I've heard. It's like they treat AAA the same way they treat their starters in the majors. They give them as much preparation. They treat them like just like with as much insight as they would with their major league pitchers, so that when they do make the jump into the major league rotation, they're ready. Like they're already kind of
Mhm.
used to that situation. So it's going to be a little different, obviously, just because you're a young pitcher going into an organization that's seen success with young pitchers doesn't necessarily translate to new guys coming in if all that success is coming from within the organization. So just something to keep in mind. It doesn't always work that way.
Mhm.
Like we talked, I think a lot of talk has been about like Texas has had some recent success bringing in veterans that have struggled and then refound themselves. Lance Lynn comes to mind when he went over to Texas and found some success a couple years ago. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they can't develop their pitchers. Like, so it works both ways as well. All right, moving on to the next, the most recent and probably one of the bigger trades that has happened. They've all kind of been big in their own right. Kyle Tucker, this just came through today, Kevin, on the move to Chicago, now playing for the Cubs. The Cubs give up Isaac Paredes, Hayden Wesneski, and then Cam Smith all ahead to the Houston Astros. What I want to say what are the Cubs doing here, but what's Houston doing here? Is this like just assuming they're not going to be able to re-sign Kyle Tucker the same way that they lost George Springer a couple years ago, when he said he was going to test the open market after once he became a free agent, and they're trying to get something. I mean, it's not as though Houston can't use Kyle Tucker in their lineup for the next year. What's the logic here? And this doesn't have as much of a fantasy question. I was just a little confused by the initial reports saying that they were open, and then when talk started getting a little bit louder that it was actually going to happen, and then for it to actually happen is just kind of amazing. What are your overall thoughts on Tucker leaving the Astros?
I guess they feel when they have Chaz McCormick, Jake Myers, and Taylor Trammell, they don't have room for Kyle Tucker.
That's
I don't get
obviously,
this at
obviously.
all. Uh, you know, something can be said for getting something for a player you're going to lose at the end of the season when you only have 1 year of control left. That's not for teams like the Houston Astros,
Exactly.
or hadn't been. But we've you know, Houston. A lot of talk over the past couple of seasons, people leaving their player development and that side and going to other teams because they've been so good at it for so long that these people get really good jobs with other teams, right?
Sure.
Houston has lost a lot of staff, and you would think that I would think anyway that in order to try to remedy that, you hold on to guys like Kyle Tucker, even if it's just till a trade deadline. I don't think they'd have got much less, well, probably, but uh, any this is just not a move I expect a team of the caliber of the Houston Astros to make. I expect the Kansas City Royals and the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Tampa Bay Rays. This is a Tampa move, right? 1 year of control left on a superstar. It just does not make sense to me for Houston. I feel like they can't be done. I know they got Shea Whitcomb. I had a cup of coffee last season. They're probably planning on him taking one of those 3 spots if they want him in the outfield because he can play the infield as well. But yeah, Chaz McCormick could bounce back. I loved him going into 2024. He was very disappointed, had some injuries as well, and then didn't perform when he was in the lineup. Jake Myers is excellent defensively. He will be in there. Taylor Trammell has been with like 12 teams for for a 27-year-old. Um, I, I'm just confused, Adam.
Yeah.
I don't have any answers for you other than I agree with the questions you have, I guess.
Yeah. A name that I don't expect to really do a lot, but somebody I've always kind of been waiting for is Pedro Leon coming up within
Yes.
the Houston organization. Um, he had an incredibly good first half in AAA last year. Kind of petered out in less so in the second half, but somebody I expected to see come up last year just for a cup of coffee at the very least, and did not. So,
Mhm.
just somebody just a name. They have a couple of outfielders coming up, the names you mentioned, and Kennedy Corona and Cooper Hummel. I'm looking at in their AAA organization right now, expected to start there, but some names that you want to keep an eye out as far as playing time goes. Of course, they have still the opportunity to bring back Alex Bregman, and they're going to have some decisions to make overall in their lineup moving forward. So, yeah, just still not expecting to see this. Isaac Paredes, though, enters the organization. I've got his rolling chart up here in his Process Plus. Overall, did very positive things without showing a whole lot of power. Can he take advantage of this new ballpark and work on top of the decisions and the contact that he's shown such positive strides in, and then have the power kind of show up later on?
I think so. I just think we have to be careful. I've seen a lot of posts on social media. 40 home runs into the Crawford boxes coming from Paredes. Well, you know,
We said this
his
about Jose Abreu too.
right. But well, with Paredes, we know that he extreme pull hitter, but the the Tampa ballpark was kind of suited for that as well. And he
Mhm.
had an amazing 2023. All right. 250, 352, 488 slash line, 31 home runs. I think that's what we're hoping for. I think people sucking 40 into the Crawford because of the Crawford boxes are are over are giving him too much added bonus for that. But I think a repeat of 2023, which is what we had hoped to see in 2024, I think is in the cards, due to the Crawford boxes helping him out there with as much as he pulls the ball. If he's going to hit second like is projected right now, yeah, I that's going to be great for him in Houston. I just said, Houston not being themselves, but they do still have Jose Altuve,
Sure.
Jordan Alvarez, Yainer Diaz, hitting right around Paredes if he does indeed slot into that second spot in the lineup. So, yeah, we could be looking at a career year coming, but I am far away from the 40 home runs I've been seeing posted by some since this trade went through.
Fair enough. Yeah, and when this trade, I mean, the trade just went through today, so we haven't really seen a spike in drafts. I don't think that this draft pick that I'm showing at pick 175 might have been, but he's been picked earlier than that, at a min of 164, 156 actually a couple days ago. So, maybe that was just with the thought that he could be involved in this trade, jumping him up, but. We'll see how this might affect. Just keep an eye on his ADP in your next couple drafts over the weekend. All right, so yeah, that's Hayden Wesneski in Houston. Obviously, you have to assume that he jumps right into that rotation. And if there was any doubt of somebody like Justin Verlander coming back or not coming back, that's got to be completely out of the picture here. Wesneski being in the Houston lineup or in the rotation do anything different than what he was doing in Chicago?
I don't think so, and I'm not even sure he is in the rotation. This could be a depth bullpen piece as well. They got Framber, Hunter Brown, Blanco, Arrighetti, and Luis Garcia. We're probably going to see Lance McCullers Jr. hopefully finally back in 2025 at some point. We thought we'd see him in 2024 before he had his setback. I don't expect to see. We won't see Christian Javier unless it's at the very end of the season, a couple of innings. But I'm not so sure Wesneski slides right in. I think he's a depth bullpen piece at least to start, kind of like he ended up being for Chicago, after we had hopes for him. But yeah, he only had 7 starts in his 28 appearances this past season. So yeah, I don't think he is in the rotation to start the year, at least.
Yeah, I guess the question is he on the 40 man? I mean, is he on the major league roster? I mean, I don't know. I'd be surprised to see him start in AAA like roster resources projecting him to for Houston. But even if they go 6-man or he becomes an extra long reliever in their bullpen, that's what I would be expecting.
Yeah,
out of
that's where I'm at.
All right, so decent trades happening all across the board, and there's still more to come. We'll end this little section here off because we are talking about the Chicago Cubs, and I don't know if this had anything to do with the other, but they do make a signing here, signing Carson Kelly to a 2-year deal. Of course, the catcher, playing in St. Louis, Arizona, now going to be playing for the Cubs. What kind of a role are you expecting out of him in a Cubs uniform? And does he get enough playing time there to did he find a situation that can put him into the echelon of the catchers that you're looking at in drafts that can get you those extra plate appearances to make them a little bit more valuable?
Unfortunately, I don't think he'll quite get there. It feels to me like going into 2025, at least going into spring training, that the Cubs are probably thinking about an even split with Amaya and Carson Kelly. However, I do think there's a distinct possibility that Carson Kelly can take over a larger role as the season goes on and get the larger side of a split rather than 50-50. But that's going to be tough. he'll definitely be somebody we're looking at throughout the season in FAAB. When we need a catcher goes down, because I don't think he's gonna be projected, even when everything's updated after this move. I don't think he's gonna be projected for enough plate appearances to be drafted in every league. He'll be drafted as a catcher too in some 15-team leagues, but probably not every league. He'll be out there.
Yeah, fair enough. It did seem like he, I'm sure there were plenty of places he could have gone where he could have jumped right into that starting position. Of course, splitting time with Amaya, it does seem like it's one of the. I'm sure there were also plenty of positions where he could have become the strict backup, even with his experience. So this was, the opportunity could present itself throughout the course of the season, but it's not going to be handed to him, of course. All right, so we've got quite a bit of signings as well to get to, and we are going to get to all of those after this quick break. All right, let's get to some of these smaller signings first, Kevin. Got a couple of 1-year outfielder deals, and I'm going to get you to compare the two because they are quite different, just based on the teams that they're signing with. Michael Tauchman signs a 1-year deal with the Chicago White Sox, and then another Michael Conforto signs a 1-year deal with the Los Angeles Dodgers. Which one of these guys actually sees more playing time? You've got to like the situation going to the Dodgers more than the White Sox for all the reasons that we've continuously talked about. But can we see there being more opportunity with the White Sox with Tauchman moving forward rather than Conforto going into a slightly more crowded Dodgers situation?
Yeah, if Tauchman's going to lead off, then that's definitely appealing. You know, we've seen a combined 750 plate appearances over the past 2 seasons. 15 home runs, 13 stolen bases. If he can push, he might be able to push that plate appearance number in a single season if he is the Chicago White Sox leadoff hitter. So there's appeal there, especially for runs and RBI. Runs, especially 114 and 750 plate appearances over 2 seasons. That's a great number. Now projected for roughly 400 plate appearances. If we would get a time and a half of that, the 600, he's up to 75 runs on a steamer projection. So that's probably about where I'm at. Of course, I'm not projecting them for 114, but 75 as a leadoff, most everyday leadoff hitter, I could definitely see that happening. He will probably sit versus some lefties, and then Michael Conforto, this could work out wonderfully for him at the moment until we see something else. This is probably replacing Teoscar Hernandez.
Right. That's exactly where I
I
saw
really
that.
thought Teoscar Hernandez would come back to the Dodgers, and he still might. But for now, I'm going to expect close to what we saw out of Teoscar Hernandez in 2024 from Michael Conforto in the same role for the Dodgers in 2025.
Yeah, I mean, I thought this was a 1-for-1. When I saw the signing, it's like, all right, well, the Conforto is just taking the place of Teoscar. He obviously Teoscar Hernandez found like the literally perfect place to sign a 1-year deal last year. He's like he was trying to find a place that would allow him to do not a prove it deal because he got a ton of money. I was under the impression he got multiple multi-year offers, just not at that, dollar amount for 1 year. So I'm curious to see where he'll go. I do think he'll probably want to take the guaranteed years moving forward. And I do not think the Dodgers are going to be in a position to give him that. And I think they got what they needed to out of the dollar amount that they gave him for that 1 year. So Conforto with the Dodgers. I wasn't expecting him to kind of get signed and get put into an everyday role with the Dodgers. But as you point, like I don't see a whole, especially as a lefty in that lineup. I'm not expecting him to see a lot of competition for playing time, except for sitting against a couple lefties here or there, or just for keeping himself a little bit rested. So this could actually end up being a pretty solid spot for him, unless they bring in another bat that could compete for playing time more directly. All right, so staying with the Dodgers, this is a small note here because we talk about it all the time, but we got a little bit more clarity from I think it was actually from Coach Roberts that Mookie Betts would be set to play mostly every day at shortstop. And we've heard this before about Mookie Betts, but we keep talking about how he'll regain that second base eligibility short order. Doesn't sound like that'll be the case going into 2025 unless something drastic happens, with Tommy Edmonds set to play center field pretty much every day, or at least the majority of the time. So who is playing second base then for the Dodgers? Is it Gavin Lux? Is it Miguel Rojas, who plays a little bit better in pretty much everywhere in the middle infield, but he historically has been more of a shortstop. What are your what's the playing time looking like on the other side of the bag for who's Mookie Betts going to be turning double plays with more often than not, in your opinion?
Unless there's another move, I think they're going to give Gavin Lux some more run here, and it worked out in streaks in 2024. Still not a ton of power, but Scott started getting on base, scoring some runs. Couple of streaks where he was showing some power there, and I think at least large side of a platoon, he's, as of right now, that's what it looks like to me. Could be Chris Taylor versus lefties. Could be Miguel Rojas, like you said. Couple of options there, but I kind of doubt this is the scenario we reach opening day with. I kind of doubt it. With the way we've seen the Dodgers bringing in players over the past couple of seasons, and the way they've been really smart about the deferred money and how they pay them, they can still afford to bring in somebody. So I'm not so sure this is what we see right now. I would say Gavin Lux, big side of a platoon, and then Rojas and Chris Taylor getting some at bats versus lefties.
Yeah, even at the bottom of that lineup, being the strong side of a platoon doesn't make you unrosterable, as it might on some other rosters. So Gavin Lux, if he can, I remember when they were moving Mookie Betts into the infield with Gavin Lux in spring training, and they were spending a lot of time together trying to get going. And Gavin Lux was looking pretty good until the very end of spring training, and obviously he had that gruesome injury that kept him out all year. Kind of derailed that. So I'm feeling as though we're getting a little bit closer to that, to seeing that again in March, and we'll see how those two are kind of jiving in the middle infield once again.
And this is a pretty big switch from what we were told. I mean, it was the team that told us Mookie Betts was done playing shortstop, right? So making this switch, what is it because they already know of another move they're working on, or is it because, you know what? No, we're confident in Gavin Lux at second base, more confident in Gavin Lux at second base than Miguel Rojas every day at shortstop. So if that's the decision they're making, he's probably going to get some pretty good run.
This announcement also, I believe, came really quickly after, and we'll get to it a little bit later, Willy Adames coming off the board and not being signed by the Dodgers. So you got. I'm wondering if the Dodgers were in.
Gavin Lux is our guy.
Yeah, yeah, of course. He was always our guy.
Right. Exactly.
Couple as we move across coast over to Baltimore, of course I've got to give a shout out again to Ben Palmer, who broke this story over at pitcherlist.com about the Orioles GM not be willing to spend money, even though he might have the green light to do so. So make sure you're checking that article out about the sources that he had from the winter meeting. So, it's nice to see that we've got like some actual like true breaking stories over at pitcherlist.com as well. But Baltimore is spending a little bit of money here as they signed Tyler O'Neill to a 3-year deal, adding another outfielder into the mix, outfield DH into the mix in Baltimore. And also Gary Sanchez signs a 1-year deal to do something for the Baltimore Orioles. I'm not sure if it'll be catch or just, be a cheerleader. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time asking you about Gary Sanchez's role in Baltimore because I don't expect it to be very much. But Tyler O'Neill, like in Baltimore with this new, like, what are they going to do with the rest of their outfield if they're paying all this money for a 3-year deal for Tyler O'Neill? What's this going to shape out to look like?
Oh, I love this for Baltimore and Tyler O'Neill. And real quick on Gary Sanchez, he can do one of two things, and it's really almost the same thing. Adley Rutschman will get designated hitter at bats when he needs a day off, and Gary Sanchez can do that. Also, they're they still, the way things are now, Ryan O'Hearn is still their designated hitter versus righties versus lefties. Then it can either be Rutschman and Sanchez is catching, or it can be Gary Sanchez as the designated hitter. So I think that 280 plate appearances we saw to Gary Sanchez last season's probably what we're looking at again. He still got to double-digit home runs. So as a streamer, when you're in a pinch, I think there actually is some value in deep leagues there for Gary Sanchez. Tyler O'Neill, I love it. Roster resource, slotting him right in the cleanup spot. 100% about health, same as we said last season when he went to Boston, and he gave us 31 home runs in only 473 plate appearances. So let's hope for more plate appearances. And this is somebody, unlike Isaac Paredes, that if he can stay healthy, I do believe can push 40 home runs.
It's just bringing in an outfielder when we keep seeing them bring up outfielders in Baltimore, and then inevitably they just don't play. Hurston Kjerstad, obviously the poster child for this situation. And so I wonder, and they have guys like Dylan Beavers coming up as well in AAA. And so they have other options in that realm. Do they finally make like that major move to actually, send off one of these prospects for a big name at the deadline to kind of put them over the hump going into the playoffs? Or are you just expecting to see more of the same and keeping the depth and maybe, finding a way to play everybody in some fashion?
You know, what's shocking to me about Ben's story is I can understand it from the point of view of we don't have to spend a lot of money. We have Gunnar Henderson, we have Adley Rutschman, we have Colton Cowser, we have Jordan Westberg, Jackson Holiday, right? Then because Kjerstad, just like you said earlier, still to come back up. So I can see thinking, why should we spend money? We have all these guys under control for years. This is great. And then you go look at the pitching, right? And Corbin Burns, free agent, but Zach Eflin, Grayson Rodriguez, sure. Dean Kramer, Albert Suarez, Trevor Rogers. This is the rotation we're going into 2025 with when the Yankees just signed Max Fried and made it and went to the World Series. Boston just signed Garrett Crochet. Right? This is our right. I understand we have all these young guys under control, but they do not have pitching. And so I really feel like something's going to be done on that end, or needs to be, and could be in the form of a trade, not necessarily a free agent signing, which would shuffle this whole thing up. But as far as Tyler O'Neill, he's going to be the cleanup hitter every day he's healthy.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, his role, especially being paid, I'm not questioning whatsoever. It's what are they doing with all the other
Why
pieces?
right. Yeah, no, I get it. It's puzzling because, yeah, they have all these young players under team control for a long time. Several of them have hit the ground running. A couple haven't. We expect they'll turn it around, Jackson Holiday, for example. But yeah, so what I love Tyler O'Neill. I love this for him. I love his spot in the lineup. They're moving the wall back in, not all the way back to where
Yeah,
it was
sure.
prior to when they moved it out, but I think his power
Plays no matter where.
might have
Yeah,
been affected by when the walls were moved out, but even though they're not coming all the way back in, his kind of power is going to be just fine.
yeah, exactly.
So I like everything about it for him, but it is puzzling. It really seems like they would be spending this money on pitching.
Hmm. A couple small signings here. I'm going to lump these together, and I'm not going to make you play ask on this one, even though there are three of them. Um, Minor league signings. Huascar Ynoa signs a minor league deal with the Minnesota Twins. Dakota Hudson signs a minor league deal with the Angels, and then Austin Nola signs a non-roster invitee deal with the Colorado Rockies. Of course, you always got to take note if a hitter signs with the Rockies, and there is any possibility of playing time. But of these three, which one would you be the most confident, and the confidence level could still be very low, of actually making, the opening day roster with their new teams, even though they're on a minor league contract?
It'd be Noah. Pretty easy for me. This actually this would be a fairly easy ask game for me. Noah? We've seen Minnesota develop pitchers recently. We've seen what Noah, the potential he has. We've seen flashes of that. Uh, Both injuries and underperformance have kind of um, derailed it. So I think a fresh start with Minnesota is great. I have never been a fan of Dakota Hudson, even when he was getting good results at times 2, 3, 4 years ago. The underlying metrics did not support it. So I've just never been a fan. Austin Nola never panned out to be what many thought he might be, but he's been able to hang around, and you know worse things can happen to a hitter than signing with Colorado. So yeah, if we were playing ask, he would be the stream, but I like Winoa, and I don't have any interest in Hudson.
Yeah, I mean, I could see Noah making the roster.
Yeah,
As a catcher. In general, Jacob Stallings being the catcher for Colorado going in, and they don't really have a backup catcher. I mean, we don't expect Hunter Goodman to go back behind the plate, though. I'm sure plenty of us are hoping that he does a little bit to keep that eligibility, or to gain it back in some formats. So there's definitely an avenue for him to make that roster. And Jacob Stallings not exactly, he is a defensive catcher everywhere he's always been. And so maybe that keeps him behind the plate in the majority of the time, but that's just like a simple injury. He's also not the, basking of health, and not the youngest guy on the roster either at 35. So there's an avenue for Austin Nola to be fantasy relevant in short order, if everything kind of goes right for him. Does that mean I'm drafting him even as my C3 or C4 in a draft and hold? Probably not at this point, but it's somebody I might be circling
it is
for
somebody
a.
we'll be picking up one
Yeah,
weekend
yeah, exactly.
in the middle of the season. Yep.
Cool. So from there, after these minor league contracts go in, Colorado actually not even signing a contract with their with their free agents here, just a non-roster invitee deal. They do make two, at least one other signing in another bit of news worth talking about. First, we'll talk about the signing. Tyro Estrada signs a 1-year deal with Colorado. This is a major league contract, obviously, and he will be in their middle infield for to start the season. Are we? Does he just take the place of what looks to be Brendan Rodgers, or is he playing any kind of other role? And if he is just being the everyday second baseman in Colorado, I know you already liked Tyro Estrada after he was, put out by the Giants. You were hoping that your Royals would pick him up during the
Yeah,
season last year. It didn't happen. But can he become even more relevant now that he's in Colorado playing half of his games?
absolutely. Absolutely. I like this move for him. It's unfortunate for Kyle Farmer, who probably lost some playing time, but yeah, you know, our friend Mike Kurland reached out to me when we talked about Kyle Farmer and joked a little bit about Sam Hilliard, which every day that goes by that he's still the only right fielder they have, that becomes less and less of a joke.
Yeah.
But he reached out and told me not to sleep on Amador, and I just don't think, and it's not just the Rockies, because yeah, the Rockies, we know how they mess around with young players and never do what we think they should. But it really appears to me that Colorado doesn't think Amador's ready. So I love this for Estrada. I think it's everyday an everyday job at second base, unless he's injured again or just does not perform, which I do not think will be the case. I think his floor, um, playing half of his games in Colorado, is, his 2022 and 2023 were nearly identical. 530 to 540 at bats, mid-teens home runs, a low 20s stolen bases, getting up to that 70 run number, not as many RBIs with a little less power, but that will go up in Colorado. I Steamer has him for 14 home runs, 11 stolen bases because he only had 2 last year, and that 2 gets the most weight even though he was injured. I'm looking at a close to 20 home run, well over 20 stolen bases, 70 runs, 70 RBI, which is adding about 20 to what Steamer has him right now. That's where I'm at on Thairo Estrada. That makes him not just a middle infielder on fantasy leagues. That's a starting second baseman. And we've talked about this. Add him to that group at second base that I'm waiting on. Same type of player as the guys we've been talking about almost every week when we're talking about our plan for second base. But he's definitely back in with this landing spot.
The other move that I alluded to that Colorado made, it wasn't actually a signing or a trade because they don't actually trade anybody. They announced that Brenton Doyle would be their everyday leadoff hitter at least to start the season. And as I'm scrolling through the lineup charts of last year, he spent pretty much the entire season right around the 3 or 4 spot. Did have a couple of leadoffs against lefties to end the season. But what does this do for Brenton Doyle's value? Where is it just a straight lose a couple of RBIs, gain them in the runs category, and then you just have to take that into account when you're drafting somebody like Doyle? Or is this a situation leadoff hitter in Colorado every single day with what he's been able to do over the last year or so? Make him that much more? Is it like a Kyle Schwarber type of situation where you have this normally you would see him in a lead or sorry a cleanup type of role? Now all of a sudden they're at the top of the order and they can add that much more value.
Yeah, I think the first thing I did was run to see what the plate appearances projected for him were, and I don't know if the adjustment had already been made, but 660 plate appearances is what Steamer has projected, and that is right about right for me. Um, going by the total plate appearances that Colorado had in 2024, their leadoff hitter in 150 games played would average about 675 plate appearances in a season. So the 660 is already really close to that. The RBI number already down below the run. So I feel like Steamer has already made the adjustment to the projections, and it looks like right where in my mind it should be, as far as not necessarily judging what the projection originally was, but the adjustment. This looks, 660 plate appearances, 20 plus home runs, 30 stolen bases. This looks like about right for me.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you have somebody, usually you see somebody that's going to steal 30 bases or more, you don't see them in the 3 or the 4 spot in general. So to put him into that leadoff spot, I'm wondering, how many more
Can we
stolen
get a bump
bases?
there?
Yeah, how much
Yeah.
of a bump can we actually give him? And he's just bump in.
And that's intriguing because that's probably their angle, because it's not his on base percentage, right?
No.
His career on base percentage is 289. He's projected for 300. It was 317 in 2024. Now in the minors, in some short stints, he had higher numbers of that. But anywhere that he was at for a substantial amount of time, he's back in that range, 300 or lower. So yeah, that's a great point, Adam. They probably intend on turning him loose more on the base paths, is really the only reason they would make this move, because the on base percentage is not one of a leadoff hitter. So expecting more stolen bases is probably not not the wrong
Unheard
thing
of. Yeah.
to do.
And his uncle Ted's pointing out and wondering if this is Doyle's opportunity to go prime Charlie Blackmon in
That
Colorado.
would be beautiful.
That would be. It seems to be kind of in the cards. And this is like
Is he gonna grow the beard?
I mean,
Full beard
I
too?
mean, by default, you have to, right?
Yeah.
And so, leadoff hitter in Colorado at age 26 too. Like that's
Yeah.
just not what you expect out of the Rockies.
So the hope is there's some improvement on that on base percentage, and I'm sure they think he can, because even if they are doing this to turn him loose, they're probably expecting more than 300 OBP.
In those last couple weeks of gladiator drafts, being drafted between 72 and 90 overall, I do expect that to get a little bit of a bump with this news, as as people start considering that 5-tool category type of player that he, in the leadoff spot can continue to be.
I have a quick funny story, Adam. You know how so sometimes it's usually players that are not on our fantasy teams that go under the radar to us. If they're on our
Right.
teams, we usually realize what they're doing. But my home keeper league, the player that rostered Brenton Doyle very inexpensively in 2024 cut him in our first round of cuts for 2025, and he was very inexpensive to keep. And everybody was like shocked, and he didn't even realize that Doyle was good, and he was on his team all season.
Oh man. All right. So he's available is what you're saying.
That's what I'm saying.
All right. Well, somebody to consider for sure, even in all formats. All right.
I got to talk about other people's mistakes after my couple of draft picks at the end of last week's show, right?
You didn't have to bring it up. You didn't have to.
Well,
yeah. You got to live with those.
I did it.
Yeah. You got to live with
it
them
happens
all season. All right. We have a whole bunch of relievers signing in new spots. And we're going to talk to all about those and a couple other bigger signings to close it out right after this. All right, let's start off with the relievers that all of them have closing experience. Whether or not they will gain more closing experience with their signings is still yet to be seen. Only one of them is I guess two of them are returning to their old teams. Blake Trinan signs a 2-year, I guess, extension with the Dodgers. Jordan Romano, who was non-tenured, did not being given arbitration for his final year with the Blue Jays. He signs a deal with the Philadelphia Phillies. Yimi Garcia does go back to the Toronto Blue Jays on a 2-year deal. And then Clay Holmes signs with the Mets. We talked about that a little bit last week, but worth kind of lumping in here as well. But they do plan on making him a starting pitcher. So of the 3 that we expect to stay in the bullpen, who has the most saves for their respective teams by the end of 2025? Trinan with the Dodgers, Romano with the Phillies, and Garcia with the Blue Jays.
Ooh, that's a great question. My inclination is as many issues as Philadelphia has had in recent years, just finding a guy they can count on for the ninth inning. They've had some really good relievers, but they've never been able to settle on a ninth inning guy. And it's appeared that they want to, right? Some teams are okay with not having a ninth inning guy. It's appeared Philadelphia has really been looking and just not been able to find him.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Romano is going to get that opportunity and could probably bounce back and make that happen. Uh, Yimi Garcia is really intriguing. We talked about this a little last week about it might not necessarily be Chad Green automatically. Could Eric Swanson's in the mix now? Yimi Garcia is in that mix as well, especially signing a 2-year deal. That means that gives me a little more confidence in what Toronto thinks of him. And Blake Trinan, I think that the Dodgers they use their bullpen to the max efficiency in this postseason. It was beautiful. They are not going to have a set guy. They kind of want to have a somewhat set guy, I think, and they're going to give that first opportunity to Michael Kopech. If that doesn't work out, Blake Trinan probably leads the team in saves. They don't want Blake Trinan to lead the team in saves, I don't believe, but I think he is their second option and one of those guys that we talk about all the time could be valuable to our roster even without the saves. I love that Blake Trinan is back in that Dodgers bullpen.
Yeah, I mean, by name recognition alone, it seems like Romano has the clearest runway. Obviously, with the history in Toronto, and then now moving into a bullpen where he's on a 1-year deal. They don't have, he's not arbitration eligible as well. So they, this is always the conversation with Philadelphia with signing all of these other bullpen pieces, all these arms that have talent, have had some success in the ninth inning, and then locking them in with Sir Anthony Dominguez and a couple other guys that they had locked in. You're like, oh, great. It's not about the money anymore. And still, they can't, as you mentioned, they
Right.
still haven't been able to find the guy, whether or not they were like, because they would do it, all of their guys, like all these guys had contracts. They all, they bottom out of arbitration and all that. And none of them could either hold on to it or felt really super comfortable. And obviously Carlos Estevez not being there any longer, and Hoffman as well, not in the mix. So I like, of the three, I like Garcia to close out the season with more saves than the three of them, just because they brought him back. He was the first man to get the ball when Romano went down as well. So I do think that Toronto trusts him enough to give him that opportunity. I do not think they trust Chad Green as much as it was pretty obvious that they should have put him in earlier on in that role toward the end of the season. They just did not. And they also didn't give him a whole lot of opportunities anyway in the second half of the season to actually win ball games. So I like Garcia in Toronto of the three. If I was looking for somebody to close out more games throughout the course of the season, Trinan might be the best pitcher like overall, but to your point, not going to be somebody I trust to gain. If Trinan leads his team in saves and still doesn't get double-digit saves, I won't be necessarily surprised. Just because to your point, the efficiency there and spreading that all around and just using the arm that makes the most sense.
Blake Trinan's the kind of guy that, and this is why I like drafting guys like this, especially late in drafting holds. He could give you close to 10 wins and 10 saves. That's amazing.
Sure. And that's more valuable than 20 saves.
Absolutely.
When it comes down to it, as long as you keep them in your lineup and you get all of those,
as long as you're getting those wins. Yep.
Yeah. All right. So some of the longer term hitting signings, we'll close it out here with this. Of course, let's just get it out of the way. Again, Juan Soto kicked everything off by actually signing a 15-year deal with the New York Mets. It's fun. He does have an opt out, I think, after the 3rd year or 4th year. Which, and then if he opts in, there's like he actually gets a raise with this deal. So it's like it's being reported at a certain number, but really it's guaranteed to be much more than that as long as he stays in the deal. And he's only going to opt out of the deal if he's just like he knows he can get even more, which I just don't foresee it happening. It's just an amazing deal for a player that totally deserves it, and it makes Shohei Ohtani so underpaid that it's kind of insane.
Right.
And the fact that you could consider Shohei Ohtani underpaid after the contract he was given. Regardless, Soto going to the Mets. Obviously we know what this does. This doesn't change Soto per se, but like, is there any kind of trickle down in the Mets outfield that you can foresee? Either somebody losing playing time or not getting re-signed, or do you think this affects Pete Alonso staying with the Mets? All Mets related recap of happening. What's going on in New York as far as the Mets are concerned after this?
So as I often do, bring up some other podcasts. So I was listening to Race and Barrels, surprise, and DVR. I bring them up almost every week. The Mets, including Juan Soto right now, are about 80 million under what they had in payroll last season. Now that doesn't mean they're going to spend another 80, but it does mean they not necessarily done. But when they signed Jose Siri, my thought was this is because they're going all in on Juan Soto. He's not a good defender in right field, right? Jose Siri is an amazing defender. I think this solidifies playing time for Jose Siri. And the batting average is horrible. The power has never really been what we thought it could be, but the speed is there too. It's really tough with the batting average, but this makes me feel like Jose Siri is a near everyday player. It really does. I think that move was made so they could go sign Juan Soto and his bad defense in right field.
It's like what we always talk about, handcuffing the Joey Gallo and somebody who can actually hit combo during your drafts.
If I have a very, very strong batting average foundation, I'm interested in Siri, but if I don't, I can't be.
So in other words, make sure Jose Siri's, stretches out his hamstrings, because he's going to be running around that outfield quite a bit to make sure he gets as many balls as possible.
And hopefully running a lot from first to second and running up those stolen base totals.
That's what he said he was going to do. He was very vocal about this.
I do. I think he was a year early on that.
Yeah. We can be a year early on our guesses and our analytics.
We are exactly. All the time, yeah.
Now he gets to be. Cool. Yeah. I mean, I think I'll give a shout out to Uncle Ted's suggestion. Francisco Lindor batting leadoff now, as he made enough of a run at MVP last year. Juan Soto could make Francisco Lindor the MVP of the National League based on making up of this lineup as well. So I think if you wanted to stretch for a shortstop in the first two rounds of your draft, you're definitely going to be able to do worse than Francisco Lindor.
Here's my question. And I think it does for me. I'll preface that. But does this give you more confidence in getting a healthy season out of Starling Marte as an everyday designated hitter?
Yeah, because I was just considering looking at that lineup, and it's a similar thing as Texas. They don't have another obvious everyday DH.
If this can keep Marte healthy, then he's probably being undervalued right now.
Yeah, I mean,
and just like you mentioned, and Uncle Ted mentioned Lindor ahead of Soto, how many RBI is Mark Vientos going to get hitting behind those two guys?
He's going to have a lot of opportunity. So
Yep.
a lot of trickle down effects with a major signing like this going into a lineup that already existed. It's not like he's making up a new part of the lineup. He's just making a decently strong lineup even stronger. Marte, even with his injury history, even with his age, still running as well. Like he's still like,
Exactly.
double digit steals, obviously. And if he's DHing every day, not putting the wear and tear in the field, he can at least match last year's total of was it 15, 16 stolen bases, maybe even get back up to the 20 mark. Considering he only had 370 plate appearances last year, if he can at least add another 100 plate appearances in 2025, he definitely becomes more valuable in that range. So good call out on Marte. And we talked about earlier, we'll close out here with Willy Adames not signing with the Dodgers. Like everybody just expected them to trade for him last year and the year before that. And instead, he signs with the San Francisco Giants on a 7-year deal. The best shortstop, one of the only shortstops on the market, gets his money. And we're not worrying about Matt Chapman moving over to shortstop any longer. As we were
Right.
contemplating that possibility. So Willy Adames playing every day in San Francisco, not the hitter's ballpark that Milwaukee was. Does it matter? Like Adames there was a lot he said about when he moved to Milwaukee, and he was very vocal about the batter's eye in Tampa not being very pleasant for him as a hitter. Tampa's batter's eye and everything else about that stadium is not a question going into 2025, and is they're not playing there. But do you think do you take any solace in knowing that maybe it was like, even though that he's going into this new ballpark that really has nothing to do with the eyesight, it's just a pitcher friendly park in general. What's your take on Adames going into San Francisco?
Well, it's more hitter friendly to right-handed hitters, so that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I think the hit in the projections might be a little too much, right? 2 of the last 3 seasons, he's hit over 30 home runs. Yes, Milwaukee, and he hit 24 on the third of those 3 seasons, only being projected for 25 home runs as a 29-year-old that's hit over 32 of the last 3 seasons. Yes, I understand the ballpark, but it's not as bad for righties. And his projections, I Willy Adames has been a guy over the last couple of seasons that it really depends on the draft room you're in. There are people that love Willy Adames. You can be in a room where it's infrequent, but he does slip a little bit. If people are going to stick strictly or believe in what Steamer has him projected for right now, 25 home runs, 14 stolen bases after going 30-20 last season, then he might end up being a value here in some rooms. He's one of the guys that I think there's I should just look at the ADP and see if what I think is correct. I feel like there's a wide range of opinions on Willy Adames. I feel like the move to San Francisco might be overcompensated for, as it is definitely a ballpark downgrade, but it might not hurt him nearly as much
In the last 2
as
weeks,
on the surface we feel like it would.
in the last 2 weeks in
So,
gladiator drafts, he has been steadily dropping. Some of it has been due to this, but over the last 2 months worth of drafts, he has just been steadily dropping in
oh
ADP
yeah,
across
and then even
formats
more the
as
last
well.
couple days.
Yep.
Yep.
So
This is gonna make me end up being in on Willy Adames, who's been a player I've always liked, and a couple of years ago was able to roster him in a couple spots. He got too expensive for me. If this continues, I'm gonna finally get some Willy Adames
yeah,
on my teams.
his most completed draftees is range between 72 and 87. But
Right.
he's got that he started off the season very regularly being
inside the
drafted
top
in
40.
top 40, top 50. Yeah. So steadily going down. And I don't think the news going to San Francisco is going to have it bump back up.
Right.
We always,
And it is a ballpark downgrade,
sure.
but I don't think it's as bad for right-handed hitters. And I think projections are taking that into account. They're also taking the 2 years ago, 2023, where he had 24 home runs in a full season's worth of plate appearances. So that's dragging his numbers down when he had 2 seasons over 30. Yeah, this might turn into a nice buying opportunity here, just like it did for the Giants.
Yeah. So, I mean, also going to be playing a major role in the top of that lineup in San Francisco. So,
Mhm.
still going to get plenty of at bats. I did want to double check to see what,
They
where
have him
he
hitting
was.
second behind Jung Ho Lee. That
Ex-
that that would be amazing.
exactly. That's exactly where I was
That would
going
be
with that.
so amazing. He
Uh,
could he could push 700 plate appearances again like he did last season. He got really close. Yeah. I like
you got
this
to
a lot.
assume he only got close to 700 without going over because he was batting in the middle of the lineup, batting
Right.
fifth pretty
Yeah.
much the entire season. Now batting at the top of a lineup that is not a bad lineup and got better with him being added into it. And like you said, with Lee actually coming back and batting leadoff there, should give him plenty of opportunities not only to score runs, but with Lee being on base, hopefully continue to put up close to 100 RBI moving forward as well. All right. So, yeah, a lot of big names changing teams. A couple of them re-signing with their old teams. And yeah, we don't even need to mention the fact that I mentioned earlier that the Rule 5 draft happened, and those are always something that's fun to look at. But Akil Baddoo being the big name that we talked about today, that was a pleasant surprise. Garrett Whitlock always comes to mind as well for me, obviously as a Rule 5 draft from that we took from the Yankees. So that was always nice. So they are far and few between showing success. But as we normally see, majority of them were pitchers, and we'll see a lot of them make noise, mostly out of their respective bullpens. Some of them have a little bit more pedigree than others from the past, but a couple of hitters did come across. We'll see if any of them actually lean out. So just to throw out some names for everybody to kind of jot down to keep an eye out. Liam Hicks, second overall pick, catcher, got picked by the Marlins, came over from the Tigers. So he should make the Marlins opening day roster. If not, he'll get sent back to the Tigers. And then as I scroll down here, Cooper Bowman, the second baseman from oh, this is fun. From the Athletics, and it took me a second to recognize that the initials here, ATH, the official Athletics shorthand.
I am still having a really hard time finding Oakland for the team pages on
Yeah.
Fangraphs. It's not there.
No, it's not. But he'll be in the Reds system, and in the Reds always need more infielders to add to their mix. There is an opening, a little bit more of an opening with Jonathan India parting ways. So we'll see if he can work his way into that situation. Gage Workman got picked by the Cubs, coming over from Detroit. Another middle infielder, left of the bag, shortstop, third base. And then Christian Cairo, shortstop from the Guardians, got drafted by the Braves. And we were talking about earlier, maybe a possibility there just with Orlando Arcia slotted in to be their everyday shortstop. But they seem to really like him in that spot over the course of the last 2 years. So any other names that kind of pop out to you, Kevin, worth mentioning? I'm not even going to get into the pitchers because yeah.
No, that we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, and as you said, I always look at the hitters first because it's a pretty big deal. You can kind of hide a guy in a bullpen if you're still on the fence about him, right? You can get him his work in blowouts in either direction. Hitters is a different story. Using a spot, and it's not just the 40-man. Using a spot on the 26-man roster for somebody that's not going to play makes zero sense. So any of these guys that do stick with the team and are not sent back to the team they were drafted from automatically deserve a deep dive. They were deep dive. They were coveted for some reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so just names to keep on, especially late in your draft and holds. And maybe half of them show up and half of them get sent back, but whoever you feel the most confident with, at least the playing time will be there in those situations. So, Kevin, a lot of moves. There's still a couple of names on the board, so hopefully we'll have plenty to talk about next week as well. But anything else you want to leave everybody else with as we get closer and closer to the end of the year and continue to work our way through draft season?
Just I think when we're talking about all these moves, and there's still a lot more to come, if you have a strong feeling about something, roll with that. Roll with it, right? Like, I did not believe that the Yankees would not go get a closer to replace Luke Weaver. It had nothing to do with my opinion of Luke Weaver. I love what he did in 2024, and I love after the setbacks in his career that he was able to do that. And I think he's still going to be a very prominent part in the Yankees bullpen. I just didn't see the Yankees rolling with him. Now, this isn't a victory lap because I'm wrong about these types of things many times as well. It's an example. So when something like this happens, it works out, right? And we said before, people that have been drafting Trevor McGill for whatever reason it was, congratulations. That's awesome, right? These things can happen. And Uncle Ted brought up early in the show, and I checkmarked this because it was perfect for this conversation. Will Pavin Smith be the Diamondbacks' everyday first baseman next year? If so, the dude can rake. I think so. And the longer we go without them replacing Christian Walker or bringing Christian Walker back, but I think I am in the camp with those that think that's going to be the Yankees' next big signing. I think that's where he's going. But a guy like Pavin Smith, if you draft him right now, assuming he's going to be the everyday first baseman for the Arizona Diamondbacks, and his projections haven't projected for over 500 plate appearances. He's only done that one time in his career. The last 3 seasons as a part-time player, the most he's had is 277. Then absolutely drafting Pavin Smith in every draft you're in because of where you can get him makes 100% sense. And if you're wrong, I'm not going to use the term he was free because it did cost you something, but it didn't cost you anything significant, and you can replace him right away, first FAAB period of the year. Just if you have strong feelings on where some of these guys are going to end up or where lineup changes are going to take place, or a guy like Pavin Smith might take over a role he's never had, roll with it. If you're wrong, it doesn't hurt you much. If you're right, it really helps you.
Yeah. And you're still holding on to that hope that, you're wrong about Christian going to the Yankees, and instead they go with your first guy, and that is Josh Bell.
Yes.
Filling in
Who
that
I have
role.
drafted in every draft.
Exactly. So let's cross our fingers on that one
To
instead.
prove the point.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. I feel Josh Bell's getting a good job. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, with all of that in mind and anything else you want to consider, that is going to wrap it up for episode 193 of On the Wire. I am Adam Howe on behalf of Kevin Hasting. Thanks for listening, and we bid you goodbye.